Hello and welcome back. If you are returning, if this is your first time, we are on chapter 17 of Time Not Here by me, David Caldicott. I'm reading out the novel from start to finish, and I have been posting the videos on Facebook, on YouTube, and in shorter form on TikTok. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you guys are enjoying it too. So I'm going to continue here with chapter 17. A large control panel with many levers and dials is standing alone in front of a large screen, projected onto which was the image of the world as seen through Daniel's own two eyes. Like a central hub or a starship bridge, a corporate head office for his mind. At the helm of the control panel was Daniel, frantically pressing buttons and trying to react appropriately to each situation he faced. He could see the panic in his movements and feel the intensity of his attempts to do whatever it was he was trying to do. The observation point stood looking towards Daniel's back as he manned the controls. Angrily, Daniel slammed his fists against the panel, pulled on his hair, and cried out, "Where am I?" The observation point moved forward, Daniel in the third-person view, turning around to reveal thousands of clones. Tens of thousands, all with Daniel's face and each with their own little temperaments. Some were angry, some were happy. All were trying to get their hands on that control panel. The one at the front, who had so eagerly demanded to know where he was just one of thousands of clones. He just happened to be the one at the front of the queue. The perspective moved upward, panning down on the panel and the clones in their queues. A voice spoke out from above, answering the question asked by the Daniel pulling his hair. Here. It took a moment for him to understand. He wasn't down there with all the clones. He was up here, looking down to them. They were just worker bees, part of a bigger him. The real him was just the observer. Next, he heard his own voice command. The clone at the control panel sighed in relief, dropped his arms and stepped aside. A new clone took the controls. This one was calm, smiling and gentle with the joystick. A warm feeling rushed through the room as the lighting brightened. Next, his voice spoke again. The smiling clone looked up at him and said, "Thank you," then stepped aside to let the next clone take his place. Daniel watched as drones came and went. He was not any one of those clones. They were just a part of him. The real him was not just the observer, but the overseer, managing the flow of the queue and letting some parts tweak the dials for a long while, others just for a few seconds. When one of those clones started pushing buttons that Daniel didn't like, he could just say, "Next." All those thoughts from before, they hadn't disappeared completely when he had vomited. He understood this. But he had disconnected himself from them. He had realized that they were not him. He was now, and had always been, without knowing it, the one looking down, making decisions about which parts to take seriously and which ones to laugh away. He could choose who he wanted at the controls. He had that choice and had had it all along. He was ready for the next question. Why in the world would I choose to let clones that make me feel like crap take the controls? At that moment, the whole vision seemed to shrink down to the size of a playing card, at arm's length before a new card landed on top of it. This new vision expanded out of the card as quickly as the last had shrunk. He saw a jungle, thick and lush, viewed from above as if from a drone, smoothly scanning down from above the tree line, searching for something. A clearing appeared with a small trail through the underbrush. Along the trail ran a huge silverback gorilla, rhythmically stomping as he forged his way through the woods. The bird's eye view moved down and behind the gorilla, watching the beast rise and fall with every step. It drew closer until the gorilla was just feet away, then inches. Moving forward, he passed through the back of the gorilla's head. He saw nothing for a few moments. He opened his eyes and saw the jungle path ahead. He could feel his breath, heavy and deep, with a pitch that echoed through his bones. He felt the heaviness of his body, colliding with the earth with every step. There was no language anymore, at least not human language. He had thoughts, but they were more like general concepts and feelings about where he was going and what he was going to do. Those thoughts only came occasionally when he needed to check he was going the right way. The rest of the time, he just experienced the sights and sounds of the jungle as he ran. All went dark again until he saw the back of the gorilla running away from him as his drone-like view returned, watching the beast disappear into the forest. Daniel looked down at one of the large trees of the rainforest, wondering what life is like for it, too. The viewpoint scanned the tree from top to bottom before entering into it, as it had done with the gorilla. He could no longer see, nor could thoughts be heard. There was just a sort of stillness. He started to feel sensations of fluid moving up through his core, which was firm and sturdy. He felt the fluid pulsing up against gravity and could feel the warmth of the nutrition that it brought. He felt alive. Then the vision faded back into its card before being swiped away into the ether. The heat of the summer dawn grew with each passing hour, multiplying the sweat pouring from Daniel's skin and making it harder to relax. He sat up, took his mask off, and stared through the doorway. He remembered the fear that he had felt when Lath had pointed that knife at him all those months ago. Suddenly, he saw a huge spider, 6 feet wide, slowly ripping through the ceiling beams above the doorframe where he was gazing. The spider grew larger and more threatening with each tear through the ceiling, its hundreds of eyes growing more bloodthirsty with each inch gained. Yet Daniel lay still, staring up at the horrific beast, unafraid for what felt like the first time of his life. He watched it eagerly clambering through the ceiling, trying to devour him. And he patiently waited, knowing that if it made it into the room, he'd handle it. Or maybe he wouldn't, but he couldn't possibly know for sure which way it would go, so why bother getting scared? Either he wins the fight of his life, or he loses and goes out with honor, having fought bravely. Cowering in fear? That's what he'd done his whole life. Not anymore. The spider faded into the darkness as Joseph came through the door and smiled at him. "Is everything okay?" Joseph asked, seeing Daniel sitting upright and taking a time out from the blackout mask. "Yes," Daniel replied, realizing the coarseness of his voice and the fatigue after what must have been 10 hours or so of this. "I saw a giant spider, but I wasn't afraid." "Good," Joseph chuckled to himself, smiled and put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Try to relax." He placed the new dish on the table, a dish containing 6 pills. He's upped the dose, he thought. Time to blast through this. He took all 6 pills in one big gulp and lay back, nodding knowingly at Joseph as he put the mask back on. As the visions continued to unfold, he felt himself getting closer to a core insight that would make everything fall into place. The insight that explained all of his bad decisions, his misjudgment of Lade's character, and the fear he felt when he was confronted by him. It was on its way. He could feel it was close. But every time he tried to skip to that point, another vision would appear and teach him something else, something that needed to be understood before he could get to that final answer. The next few hours were spent reliving more moments from his past, girlfriends he had loved and lost, jobs he'd won and abandoned, accomplishments he'd felt proud of, and mistakes he'd tried to forget. Every fork in his road was shown, and each time he found himself watching the scene unfold, wondering that same question: why on earth did I do that? Each time the solution was just out of reach. All he was shown was what he could have done instead, usually laugh. A few more doses had been taken by now, and the sensation of Kimber's effects surging after each dose was now familiar. Electricity starting in the toes, a gradual wave of clarity in the mind, then a return to the eternal deck of vision cards, each containing a key memory that either had haunted him or was held up and applauded by his mind. In this space, they were neither. They just were. He'd flick through them like apps on a smartphone until they faded into a quiet darkness. That usually signaled time for the next dose. Later, his visions had become more abstract and less rooted in his own personal experiences. Some were totally alien to his physics perspective, like seeing the galaxy as a living organism that transmits information about the life within it to other galaxies. He saw information carried through light and other mysterious energy that pulsed out of stars, planets, and quasars, connecting them all together in a neural-like network, sharing data and comparing results. Suddenly, he saw a series of fast visions, all the memories of when he felt ashamed for not having spoken up for what he believed in. He felt a strong urge to arch his back and stretch, so he raised his midriff and chest while keeping his head and buttocks firmly on the bed, stretching until crack. A loud and painful pop cried out from his neck, just behind the voice box. He felt a surge of blood or energy or warmth or something flowing up his spine and into his neck as he watched the next deck of vision cards slowly fade. It was as if there had been a blockage that held years' worth of bad memories, keeping his voice hidden from the world. He wondered where the blockage had come from, why it was there. Of course, it probably started when Ethan... Wait. The mouse. That damned mouse. He had been wishing for this vision to come for so long. He had endured such unexpected sidetracks of galaxies and gorillas, hoping they would eventually lead him here. Yet, no matter how hard he concentrated, all he could see of that day was the preamble. Ethan asking the teacher if he could go with Daniel to free the mouse. Before all went dark, the thinking mind went quiet, and the tide of Kimber's effects withdrew once again. Not yet. The voice repeated. Not yet. Thank you very much for listening. This was a much shorter chapter than previous ones. I'm just going to keep on going, guys. See you in the next one.